Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the sessions on DataINTalk, the topic on data that we are discussing every week. Every week, we have been discussing different types of topics around data architectures, some of the larger frameworks which has the different components of data. And while we are going through them, we have been understanding the details across the activities, the other concepts, the core essential concepts, and how do you basically establish and do the data implementations and these data journeys in your different organizations as part of your overall data journeys that you normally take in. Today, again, we are back with another exciting session on data in talk, and the topic that we're going to cover and focus today is on metadata management. Now, as part of that, we're going to look into what are different aspects across metadata management. We'll spend some time in understanding what are the key concepts around metadata management, what are the key activities that are involved in metadata management, the metadata strategy, how do you understand metadata management requirements, how do you create the metadata architecture, and then I will walk you through what are the key capabilities that resides within the metadata management solutions that exist. What are different techniques of data lineage, what is business lineage, and technical lineage, and what are some of the implementation guidelines as a best practice. And then just to operationalize the metadata management practice, what are different governance aspects, with respect to the policy controls, process controls, what are the standards and guidelines that we're going to look into. Now, in very simple terms, if I have to ask you about metadata, metadata in very simple terms is defined as data about data. But sometimes this word data about data, if you ask someone, people will just mention data about data, but it has an inherent meaning across it, right? Now, if I take a very simple example of, let's say you have a bottle of water. Okay, so let's say you have a bottle of water, something like this over here. Now, if I just remove a label, this label which is there on this bottle, I just keep it, remove it, and just keep the side. And this remains like a plain transparent water. Now, I will not be able to understand whether the bottle is containing water, it is containing turpentine, it's containing some oil, vinegar. A lot of these are transparent. These are look similar. If it is, sometimes it might be something dangerous like your acids and all, right? So you cannot just open up the bottle of water and just start drinking, because the same bottle could be used for storing some of the other kind of objects also. Now, what is something that will help me in understanding what is inside is the label which I would be able to see in this water, right? So I can see that this is mentioned that it's a packaged drinking water. Sometimes you will not be able to understand whether it's a normal water or sparkling water, right? Then what is the date of manufacture? What is the expiry date? What are the constituent elements, right? So any kind of a product that you take, right, it will be having a lot of these additional information that helps in your buying, in your entire buying exercise. So that is same as metadata. This is something that is the metadata. The product is inside, but the data that is giving me to help me to understand what is the product is nothing but my metadata, right? Now, metadata is also from a data perspective, right? If you extend the same example, there would be a lot of technical business processes, business data rules, constraints, and all that exists, right? So, for example, in your database, you see the database, but then you'll see so many different types of data structures being used, data elements being used, right? Data models, the relationships. Now, in case if those things are not there, just looking at the data, you will not be able to understand how it is being created, how it is being been defined. Is it something which is a direct field? If it's a calculate field, it's a KPI, it's a metric. So metadata is something that is helping other different organizations and different types of data sets to understand that this is all about the underlying data, right? And metadata has so much other use cases also. Like, from example, from a data quality perspective, one of the key component when you start your data quality journeys is nothing but your metadata management, right? So, like, for example, if you buy a product, right? So not only coming to data, if you're going and buying a product, first thing that you will be seeing is whether there is a quality certified, whether there is an international standard, certification coming in, or let's say, for example, if there is an, FDA certified medicine that you want, right? The reason we want to trust, these kind of products while we are buying is because of the trust that we are having with these institutes, that there are proper quality assessments that has been done. So in fact, data quality, if you take in, is nothing but it's again a metadata, but it's about the quality aspect. It will help you to understand about the quality aspect about. And so many different use cases will be there. So metadata is not only extended or limited to understanding the data, but once you have a proper understanding about your underlying data, it will also help you to process the data. It will help you to integrate the data with the other data sets. From a security perspective, it will help you in securing the underlying data. From an auditing perspective, it can help you in auditing the underlying data, govern the underlying data, right? So these kind of, is nothing but, are all examples of metadata. Yes. Now coming back to your libraries, right? Now, if you just take a book and the book doesn't have a cover page, the book doesn't have an index, right? Or, the library is full of these kind of books, which doesn't just has the content. Now, how will you understand that, what is there inside the book unless and until you read it completely, right? So even when it comes to in your library, if you want to go and identify and search for a specific book, like a specific magazine and all, these are all examples where you might try to create something called as a catalog, right? A catalog which has all the books listed, the description of that book, who is the author, who is the publisher, right? What is the theme inside the book, right? So you might be seeing, like, for example, some of these websites like O'Reilly, Springlers, and all that you might be using, Manning and all, right? So when you want to search for a specific book, how do you know whether this is the right book that you're looking for? It is because of that underlying metadata that is being stored, the description of the book, the author of the book, but the metadata information about the book. So metadata management, that's the reason, has been getting a lot of popularity and, with big data coming in, right? One of the one of the, uh, you know, key drivers, or I say the changes where people started identifying metadata very much important was when big data came in, where now, there is a humongous amount of data that is getting generated, and you cannot go and start looking into each and every data sets and, understanding what is the nature of the data and applying the security controls and practices, right? So initially the data might be finite, so it might have been still be okay. But now there is a rapid explosion of data that was there. And now because of that, metadata started becoming a lot of popularity. Similarly, use cases like tracking the underlying data, the data lineage aspects, where now a lot of regulations getting it mandated that they want to have a full transparency across. So metadata started getting a lot of popularity in your from a risk management perspective, from a documentation perspective, from your monetization use cases perspective, because now organizations started saying that it is not only about data being an asset is fine, but if I'm not able to understand what the data is, I will not be able to manage it, right? So metadata starts helping me to give the clarity about the underlying data. And metadata has been existing since the time data has been existing, but it was a very informal way of managing metadata. But now we want to have it defined very clearly. And that's the reason in the Dharma wheel also you would be able to see that metadata has been called out as one of a very critical component as part of the overall Dharma, the Dharma wheel that we say. Now, there are certain also standards also start coming up because with technical metadata coming in and all, now we have certain kind of required to have a certain kind of standards, right? So you have the ISO 11179, which speaks about the metadata registry standard. So it defines some of the best practices, some of the aspects with respect to what needs to be taken in, right? So the entire metadata driven exchange of data in a heterogeneous environment is primarily one of the key aspects which ISO 11179 defines. At the same time, it has the exact definitions of the data. There are how the metadata needs to be stored, all these kind of different aspects, what are the roles and responsibilities of different teams is being defined and available as part of the ISO 11179 standard. Now we have been seeing the different context diagrams, so the entire context diagram, one of the key components is to what are the goals. So one first goal that I was mentioned is that it needs to provide an organizational understanding of what are my different business terms and what is the how we will be able to use the data. Right. So the first thing is it gives you a clarity about your underlying data. It helps you in the better understanding. Then it also one of the key component of metadata is the metadata might be spread across your entire ecosystem. It might be there in your disparate sources. And just like for my underlying data, where when I want to do any kind of an MIS or business intelligence use cases, I might be struggling in getting or collating the data. So I need to create it into a central repository of data, like a data warehouse or a data lake. So similarly, what I try to do is the metadata is also something that I will try to bring in from consolidate from the disparate sources. Then also, I also provide as part of the metadata management exercise. One of the other ways I have some standard way to access the metadata. Now, as I was mentioning, different teams might be having some formal, informal ways of, creating and capturing the metadata. But now I want to have a standard way how I'll be able to access my metadata. Then I can also ensure to have my metadata quality and security. So the same aspects which is essential from your data perspective also extends to your metadata, right? So metadata quality is also important. It's not only just I will be capturing, I say that it's a mandate for have definitions, but the definitions are very vague. Let's say, for example, you might have seen, normally when data dictionaries are created or something like that, what happens is you have a field, like customer ID. In description also, you will see a customer ID just for the sake of creating, I will just create. Or let's say, for example, I have a field which is, let's say, LTV. Yeah, here also it's mentioned LTV, right? So rather than having clarity, there is no consistency, there is no proper understanding definitions, right? So I might have to do some kind of a standardization. So standardization as per ISO 11179, I might be doing. So quality is not only applicable with respect to the data, it also applicable to metadata and then security aspects, right? So one of the very uh, key, I'll say, application of metadata is also in your security use cases, right? So for example, I have certain kind of personal sensitive information, right? So PSI, personal and sensitive information, PCI, right? So these kind of data sets, I might start applying. I know that these are the fields which are having these sensitive information. I can start applying some kind of anonymization, masking, encryption methods. I can do some key managements very easily, right? So metadata management also is, in your classification, in your data discovery, plays a very important role in these kind of use cases. Now, what are the different types of business drivers if you take in? What are different types of business drivers that helps in your metadata management use cases? So first is we have seen that it increases the confidence in your data. So it provides the better context and enables the measurement of your data quality also. Data quality, in fact, one of the type of metadata. Then it also increases the strategic information by enabling the multiple uses. So multiple types of use cases I can use it. Like for example, master data is one of the use case I want to have. So for any of those use cases, metadata management is the first and the you know foremost thing that you want to start doing it. Then also you improve the operational efficiency. You can start identifying the data and processes by once you start identifying, right? So for example, a lot of data sets might be redundant. So in those kind of use cases, it would be very easy or it would be very useful for you that, you start identifying these use cases, and that will help you in identifying what kind of aspects would be important for the use cases. Then you also have certain kind of areas where, you want to start preventing the out of the data, or any kind of data which is incorrect. You want to prevent that use, that the data is not being used correctly. Then how you can start reducing your data oriented research time, which is there. So the research time might be coming down. At the same time, you also want to improve your communication with your data consumers or the IT professionals. You also start creating accurate impact analysis that might reduce your risk of the entire project failure. You also improve your time to market. You start reducing the system development life cycle. So then you also start reducing a lot of your training costs because there's a lot of documentations already you are getting creating. So a lot of time and efforts that you might be spending in your training, creating the training, use cases and training materials and all will be trying to reduce. And because of which, you know, there would be a staff turnover that might be happening in case if documentations and data context are not there. All of this will start reducing. Then you can also start supporting your regulatory compliance use cases. Then you start collecting and integrating the metadata from the different types of driver sources. I was mentioning about the metadata consolidation. It also starts to provide the standard, a way that how we can start accessing my metadata. And then finally, the metadata quality and security aspect. So all these are the different types of use cases that you can think about or business drivers. So if you see the guiding principles, what are some of the guiding principles like the implementation of the metadata management will be defined, dependent on a lot of these guiding principles. So one is an organizational commitment. So first and foremost thing, people have to understand the metadata is important. People start thinking that data is an asset, but along with data, metadata is also an asset. And unless and until they understand this, they might not drive the metadata management program as a whole. Right, so it's a strategy program, overall strategy, along with the data, underlying data that you might be want to spend, your money in getting and driving some data science analytics use cases. But people they don't feel is till the time you don't have a proper meta management program, a lot of those use cases will be struggling. Then the strategy aspects. So you need to develop a meta management strategy that that defines and that basically tells and accounts for with respect to how the metadata will be created, how it will be integrated, how it will be accessed, what kind of the requirements that might be driving and enabling that option of the meta management products. At the same time, this metadata management strategy should be also aligned with some of your business priorities. Then also on the enterprise perspective, uh, it's very much important to rather than taking a more of a very narrowed vision to have a more of an enterprise kind of a perspective. When you want to ensure future extensibility, you want to have iterative and incremental delivery. So this kind of enterprise and perspective is something that you must be taking. Then socialization, how you can start communicating the necessity of metadata. You would start telling what is the purpose of each of the metadata, what is the socialization of the value of metadata. It will encourage the business to start using and then start contributing also. That's a very important. So socialization is also very much important because this is not like a single person's exercise. It might be required to have inputs from the business teams. The definitions has to come from the business teams. The technical metadata will have to come from your IT team, the application owners team. Sometimes you might have to reach to your product teams. There are a lot of vendor products that you might be having, right? So you might have to reach out to them as well. So socialization is also one of the key guiding principles. It is not like you start creating something all of your own and as an individual you think that it will be successful. That's not how it works. Yeah. Then on the access perspective, how you can start ensuring that the staff members they know and have an understanding of how to access and use the metadata. So normally if you take any of the meta management solutions, so the access has been provided to everyone within the organization. It's very similar to like, since it's a lot of the documentations and all, everyone in the organization will be the users or will be having a critical role to play when the data journeys in the data life cycle. So that's the reason the access is to be provided by everyone to everyone. And then you should also start enabling the people, start training the people. That's a very important role as well. Then on the quality aspect, how you can start recognizing that metadata is just like it is being produced through a lot of these existing processes, like through data modeling, SDLC lifecycle, to the business processes, right? So those kind of things, while you're doing, you also start capturing the and keeping data quality, the quality of the metadata also one of the key essential aspects, right? Now, process owners have to be held accountable. It is not like because so many people would be involved in this generation of the metadata, the quality will start coming in and so every Just like in a data mesh, you have the domain ownership and the data, the product as concepts. So now these people are also should be held accountable for the quality of data. Then audit perspective, how you can start setting, enforcing the standards, different standards from metadata that can start simplifying the integration and enable the entire usage of the metadata. Then from improvement perspective, how you can start creating a feedback mechanism. So what will happen is as part of the feedback mechanism, the consumers can start informing the meta management team, what is the metadata that is currently, is live, which is currently might be some of them might be out of date, some of them might be incorrect, right? So that improvement area is also some of the key thing that is not like a one-time exercise. It has also will go through the entire improvement lifestyle. This is a more of a crosswork. You can just do it later, just for fun. You can understand what is defined. So it's just people who would like crosswork will try to get it very easy, but interesting that you can just try it out later. There's an option also. That's the final solution I was given as well. Now, let me just introduce what are different types of metadata that we have. So we have seen about metadata, three main categories of metadata. Yeah, so you have the business metadata, you have technical metadata, and you have operational metadata. Now, these types of metadata basically helps you to define that who will be responsible for which type of metadata, right? So these categories also avoids any kind of a confusion where people will say that no, this is not something that is owned by me, it has to be done by the IT team. The IT team will say that no, it is done by business, and the operations team, no, we are not part of it, right? So that kind of a fight which happens, this will try to avoid that kind of a fight from happening, right? So metadata, as you can see, which is of business, technical, and operational. So what is an example of a business metadata? Each of them we will try to understand that. But then there are other categories of metadata that you can have, right? So this is one type of way that you can define the metadata. Then metadata could also be the descriptive metadata. So descriptive metadata are those metadata, like for example, from the books example we took, right? So the title, the author, the subject, right? So it will give you the descriptions about the underlying metadata, right? So a lot of this would be like coming in from the business metadata, right? The second type of metadata that you have is a structural metadata, right? So structural metadata will be more technical kind of metadata. It could be business also, but it tries to give you what are the relationships between the different resources, the components, what is the technical structure in which the data is being organized, all this kind of the tables, the definitions, the relationships and all will be a structural metadata. And then you have the administrative metadata, right? So administrative metadata is very similar to your operational metadata. So it will have yes, like for example, what is this version number? What is the underlying what when it was last updated, when it has been in how much time it passed, failed. So all those kind of things which might be useful for your administrative purposes will be there. Now, some of these, each of these, if you take in, what is business metadata? Now, business metadata primarily is more useful for your business set of users, like your business analyst, your business owners, right? So if you remember from the data modeling exercise in the data modeling chapter, we discussed the logical data model, which is more useful for the business set of users. So business data metadata will be falling under this category, right? So business data metadata primarily will have the concept, the subject areas, so different types of definitions, the business rules, transformation rules which are being used in the business context, right? The logical data models, what is the data quality rules that you need to define, right? In the business terms, not in the technical translated one. Then what are data standards, data policies existing, right? So these kind of things are more from a business perspective important, right? Even the data classifications and all, right? Now, on the other hand, you have the technical metadata. The technical metadata will try to provide you information about the technical details, right? So, for example, you have the physical data model, right? Then you also have the physical databases, the columns, the column properties, the data types, the database objects, the permissions which are there, access permissions, the CRUD permissions, then what is the relationships that exist, the cardinality, the constraints that exist, the different types of, the objects, physical objects that are existing, right? Then what are the data lineage perspective you can consider, how the data is moving in from one source to another, on the technical lineage perspective. So these kind of things. Then on the machine perspective, what is the machine hardware, the technical details across it, all would be the categories under your technical material. And then you also have the third category, which is the operational metadata. So operational metadata will be more useful for the operational access, use cases. Like for example, some jobs are getting executed, so whether the job has passed or failed, then whether everyday tracking of the job's execution, the history information, then any kind of a schedule related activities that you have defined, the error logs that might have, the query patterns, the access patterns, any kind of version, you know, upgrades that is happening, the backup retentions, the SLAs that have been defined, data archiving, all those kind of data sharing rules, agreements. Right? So these kind of things you will start seeing across as part of your operational metadata. Now, what are the kind of the different types of metadata requirements when it comes to uh, keeping the metadata, right? Now, from a metadata requirements perspective, these are some of the things that you can see that the focus when you're trying to create metadata should be with respect to the what you want need to create. So you have when you want to create metadata, what the focus should be more on how you are creating more data and capturing all necessary information. So also you try to understand what is your existing data, what is the gap between them, how do you will be able to movement between the different data sets, between the different systems and the metadata related information across them, how you can start accessing the underlying data across different systems, and then start sharing the data as well across different systems. So you can see the sources of metadata could be where it will be existing for your application metadata repositories. The business glossaries will start capturing all the business metadata definitions, concepts, terminologies we have seen in the business glossaries. Then the BI tools will be capturing a lot of these, the curative fields, the analytics outputs, the report fields, the report elements and all. So for that also the corresponding metadata needs to start getting captured. A lot of those things might be directly created in the BI tools. And then from the configuration management perspective, you know, you might be doing a lot of IT configurations with respect to the tools, the parameters, and these kind of parameters and components that you might be setting it will be also needs to be captured very clearly. So those will be the configuration management aspects. Then data dictionaries, as we've seen. So data dictionary will be capturing, it's a more of a data dictionary. You all of it have used it. It will capture the entire structure, the contents, the technical definitions, the what is the data type, what is the precision, what is the scale, these kind of different aspects it will capture. The data dictionary is again one of a very important document which normally will use for any understanding the underlying, the entire objects that you have in the database. Then data integration tools might be useful, where you want to integrate the data from these multiple sources. You want to bring in the metadata from these different sources into a single repository. So data integration tools are very handy, are very useful in these kind of use cases as well. Then you also have the database management and system catalogs. So this database management system catalogs will be trying to describe the entire content of the databases, what are there. It will have the sizing information, the software versions. So it will also have the deployment status, right? So all the more lot technical kind of cap details would be captured. Then data mapping management tools. So you will have these data management mapping tools, right? Which will be useful for doing your source to target mappings when you want to do data movement, data migration kind of use cases. So these are useful, to capture these, these source to target mappings. And this is also one of the key reason why you will see that these solutions are useful in your data lineage kind of use cases. Then you also have the data quality tools. The data quality tools might try to provide the entire use cases on your data quality implementation approach that you're going to use. What are different types of profiling use cases that you will help you to do to understand your underlying data and what are profile patterns and with respect to underlying data. So that is again the metadata information you can say. It is giving you a condensed view of the underlying data. Then you also have the directories and catalogs that you will be creating. So capture these data sets which are residing within the systems, your sources, your locations, data locations within the organizations, all this. Then you also have the different data metadata coming in from your event messaging solutions, like you have the Kafka systems and all. This is more for your real-time kind of metadata coming in, right? So that is one another important aspect where the data might be continuously moving across your different sources, or and there are events related data streams, streaming related data that will be captured, right? So it's very much important to start capturing this type of metadata as well. Modeling tools and repositories. So while you're doing the modeling, data modeling, right? You need to capture what is the subject area, what are the logical entities, what are the logical elements, attributes, relationships, the cardinality aspects, the optionality aspects. So all this kind of thing as part of data modeling tools. Once you start capturing, these are nothing but these are the metadata information that you're trying to capture. Then you also have the reference data repositories, which is, as we have learned it during your MDM, that we want to capture this as part of my reference data, right? So we might have the code, the descriptions, the enumerated data that we might be required to capture as part of my reference data creation. So those are some things that I will also create. So this goes very much hand in hand with your metadata management solutions, reference data management. Reference data as a capability is also one of the key aspects, because when you start capturing any kind of data element, you also start capturing what are the underlying reference values that it might be having, right? So those kind of things. Then service registries is with respect to all the different service related endpoints connectivity. So normally you have the service bus that might be useful for the information exchange between the different front end to your, the backend layer. So service registries will have certain types of service endpoints, that will be helping you to establish the connections between your different layer. Nice. Right. Now, this is a typical type of a metadata architecture. A metadata architecture also could be of different types. So these different types of metadata architecture is useful when it comes to how you want to is the kind of a metadata architecture that you want to define, right? So in this centralized metadata architecture, as you can see, we have the metadata coming into a metadata portal, which is my central place. And this metadata repository is trying to fetch in the metadata from the different tools like the BI tools, modeling tools, ETL tools, the service repository, the DBMS tools, reference data tools, quality tools, messaging tools. All of things are coming in. So this is a centralized metadata architecture where we are trying to get in the metadata from all the different sources into a central place, right? Now, the advantage of this is it is highly available. All of this is possible to get it into a single meta repository. It would be very much useful so that you can, it has a quick retrieval time, with respect to placing a request and getting the information. Then the database structures might not be much changing, right? So this kind of things means some of the good advantages. But what happens is this sometimes it is not possible to have all the metadata bring it into a central repository, and the single repository might start having a lot of performance issues if too much of metadata is coming in, right? That's the reason it might be sometimes the maintenance might be getting costly, extraction might be sometimes difficult as well, right? So you also have the distributed metadata architecture. So here what we're doing is, right, rather than having an enterprise metadata repository, we don't have the centralized metadata repository. All the respective metadata is stored with respective solutions, and there is no centralized. Now, this is one of the disadvantages. As we have seen, there is no standardization that we can start applying. Everyone will start having their own way of storing the metadata. The query capabilities might be impacted, right? But as an advantage, you see that I don't want to bring in the metadata into a single repository. I can still manage it if I'm able to manage it at the individual system level. Then this kind of a metadata architecture is being more used. And then you have the hybrid kind of a metadata architecture, which combines the advantages and disadvantages. So here you have the centralized repository. However, what happens is the centralized repository will only have my user account related metadata. critical standards items and all. I will not bring all my metadata items. The remaining metadata will still be in a decentralized location. Now, as and when I want to have that metadata bring in, I can pull that from the respective systems and hold it into my central repository. Now, as an advantage, you can see that there is a near real-time retrieval that I can start getting in as part of the overall exercise. Uh, and then I am also able to use a kind of a segregation, so all the metadata I'm trying to have it centralized, but only for the critical metadata. I'm not bringing in all the metadata. So, and while I'm bringing in any new metadata, I will also see if there is a deduplication exercise that I can do that will help in avoiding the metadata. Excellent. And then you also have the bidirectional kind of metadata architecture. So bidirectional kind of a metadata architecture will help you in having a bidirectional view about how the metadata flows, right? So here you can see if there is a change in metadata in any part of the architecture, there is a kind of a two-way communication that is happening, right? So there is a feedback, that coordination that might happen from the entire repository into my source. So this kind of things is a more better way of capturing the metadata. Now, one of the disadvantages is, as you can see, that the changes that might be happening, right? They have to be looked in, which respect to which it's just each of them has to be separately handled. Each of them have to be taken care separately. So there might be a kind of a more additional resource and requirements, other additional requirements that might come in when it comes to managing the metadata. Now, these are some of the activities that you can see, right? So the first type of activity is to define the metadata strategy, right? So define the metadata strategy is to how will you want to move from your current state to your future state practices, right? So the metadata strategy will try to give you a framework that you can start providing to my development teams so that to improving the entire metadata. Now, as part of this, there would be certain kind of components that you will do. So first and foremost thing that you will do is you will start initiate the metadata strategy planning, and you define the metadata strategy plan. The short term and the long terms defines the charters, the scope, objectives. With the overall governance efforts is something that you will start doing it. Then you start doing your key stakeholder interviews as part of it. You start allowing existing metadata sources and information up. You start accessing them and start assessment, start understanding these assessments will try to determine what is your relative degree of difficulty that you might be having when you want to start solving the metadata and other types of system issues, right? You start undergoing the interviews, the documentation reviews, all of it. And this is the stage where you might also start doing detailed interviews, of the key IT staff, review documentations that you will start doing, system architecture, data models, etc. Then you also start developing the future metadata architectures, so whatever the future vision that you have, the long-term architecture, we have seen different types of metadata architecture. So which one you want to, you go over. And then you start defining a phased implementation plan. You validate, integrate, and prioritize whatever the findings that you have got in, and then create a phased implementation approach. The second thing that you do is you start understanding the metadata requirements. So in your second stage, which is your understanding metadata requirements, you start with the content, right? So in the content, what you start doing is you start identifying what is metadata that is being needed and at what level it might be required. So there will be physical and logical names that needs to be captured, for the tables and columns. So as part of the metadata content, it could be something that would be very much different. So there are different types of functionality focused requirements that you might look into. Like for example, what is the frequency of the metadata of data volatility of the changes, the synchronization times that might be required between the sources, what are the history informations that you want to capture, what are the access rights that you want to have, who would be able to access the metadata, how they would be able to access the metadata, these kind of aspects. Then the structure aspects, the model structures and all. Then the integration aspects, the degrees and the rules that you might be required for integrations. Then the maintenance aspects, the management aspects, the content, quality content, and security aspects. Right? Now you define what is the metadata architecture. So in the metadata architecture, when you start creating the metadata, you start designing your architecture, right? So this architecture should be capable you can start scanning the different types of meta sources. Periodically, you can start updating the repository. So that is one thing. Then you also have the managed metadata environment. So this can start isolating from the end user. So what is the different types of architectures that we have seen? How you define what is this architecture? So based on the different requirements of this organization, you have the user-defined functions that you can have to visualize and create on the different, the final architecture diagrams. You also try to create whether you want to have a centralized metadata repository or you want to have a decentralized or a bidirectional kind of a metadata kind of an architecture that you want to take. Once you define that architecture, then you start creating your meta model, right? So the meta model is nothing but the data model for the metadata, which is the meta model that we say, which is for the repository. So this is one of the key design steps as after your metadata strategy. You start completing your requirements, you define the different levels of your meta model, right? As you can have it. And, it also explains what's the relationship between the systems. Now, a lower level meta model that dictates the attributions, described elements, and the process in the model that would be there. In addition to having a planning tool, it is also very much important. Now, this kind of things you do. And then lastly, you have the entire query report and analyze kind of use cases where you would be able to verify what are the different types of data assets, the different types of components that would be required to measure and evaluate the overall activity. So this is a meta model example, but a model example, you can see that some metadata repository meta model, how it looks like. So the boxes, as you can see, will be the high level different major entities, what are the relationships between those entities. So that is something that you start after you create the meta model, you apply the meta standards like the naming conventions, uh, the custom attribution, security visibility, and then you start managing your metadata stores. What are the different types of control activities that you want to start doing as part of the meta model? Now, there are different types of tools that you can start using as part of your entire metadata repository. Now, these solutions definitely gives you a kind of a edge, a capability, and enabler works as an enabler because right from extracting the metadata, initially manually extracting the metadata, collecting the metadata might be a very tedious task. But once you have a metadata management solution, they have the capabilities that they can integrate with the systems, extract the metadata information, start cataloging that metadata. And then once you have your business definitions captured in your business metadata, they would be able to integrate your business metadata with your technical metadata and give you a business to technical data lineage as well, right? So these using different solutions that exist. Some of the leading solutions in the metadata management space includes your Calibra, includes Informatica, EDC, the Exxon, you have Alation, you have Atlan, you have Atacama data governance solution, you have IBM data governance, you have on the cloud stack, you have Google has their own data catalog, right? Then on some of the technical lineage perspective solutions like AHG Rochelle, you have, um, solutions with like Solidators and all, which are very you have good capabilities on the good data lineage capabilities that they have. So multiple solutions that exist on, and each of them are providing very similar capabilities on the managing the metadata aspects. Now, what are different types of techniques that are associated when it comes? So one is the data lineage impact analysis, right? So as part of the metadata management exercise, one of the key aspect is how you can start understanding the how the data is flowing between the different systems, right? So that is nothing but in the form of a data lineage, right? So what data lineage does is it helps you to understand the entire flow of your data in your entire ecosystem, right? So that is important because what happens is once you start start seeing that how your data is moving across it as part of your different processes. So you normally create something called as a data process flow diagrams, right? So for example, in this example, you can see how I've created the entire sample data lineage. So you have the entire total back order, which is the final business data element that you have, but this is physically implemented using your, and this is being calculated using your unit cost in cents, the tax and ship to state, and back order quantity all combining together. And those are being then calculated from the some of the previous data elements, right? So having a data lineage or having a data and single view of your overall view that how the data is flowing helps you in your doing your impact analysis. So it gives you a complete visibility how the data is moving, how the data is getting transformed, how the data is getting used by the different systems. Right. So this is at a detailed level, and you can go further detail with respect to the different systems, with respect to different individual attributes, right? So those are all very much possible. And then you can also have it at a system level lineage, which is something like this, how to just to understand how the data is just flowing between your different systems, how your different systems are integrated from each other. That is another very important aspect. So you can see, one of the key aspects is it should be able to have a focus both on the business and technical. It is not that we should only have a technical focus and do a technical lineage. We should have a focus both on the business focus and technical focus aspects as well. So what are different types of techniques that you can see? So one is method for big data ingestion. Now, many of the big data related aspects, so as the data is now coming in a unstructured kind of a format, so what we will have to have is we don't require to actually bring in the data physically, right? Because what will happen is a lot of times of, if you start bringing the data, there would be a huge volume of data that we'll have to manage. But we are able to, if we are able to manage the metadata, then it can still give us the necessary information. So metadata tags are normally applied when you're trying to ingest a metadata. It helps you to capture what kind of a content that this data is happening, what are the domains that this data belongs to, what is the classification of this data. So the data metadata, when you're trying to have these metadata tags, the data profiling can help you to identify what are data domains, what are the relationships, what are data quality issues that it might be having. And it can also start enabling that tagging. You can start doing the PII tagging and all, PCI tagging. All of it is something you can start doing. You can do data profiling. You can start identifying the data domains relationship between the different data sets as well. So what are the different types of implementation guidelines, right? So as part of the implementation guidelines, there are certain kind of best practices that we need to use so that, we can minimize whatever the risk that is there in my organization, how we can start facilitating the acceptance of my manager repositories and material management use cases. Sometimes you use some of your open relationship database platforms also as a material management exercise. And there are a lot of material management solutions that are there existing now, which are coming as open source, like you have open metadata. So these repository contents also defines like what are the different types of metadata aspects that you want to capture, the design, the technical definitions, the business definitions, all a collection of all of it coming in together, right? So there's another solution that you can explore, which is a data solution, which also has tick marks on each of these capabilities I have been speaking on. So you can just have a look at that as well. And one of the key important aspect is the planning, how you can start planning that at in what sequences the metadata use cases have to be done. Will it have to be done, in a phase wise, application wise, or you want to do it at a department level? So that is again a call that you do. So for that, you do certain kind of key exercises. So first and component that you do is you start doing a something called as a readiness assessment. So in your readiness assessment, what you do is you try to assess what is the lack of the maturity of your, so it's in case if there is any kind of an errors that is being identified currently, there is invalid or incomplete assumptions that you are taking in, or there is a lack of knowledge about the context of the data, then there could be an exposure to sensitive data as well, which might put the consumers at risk as well. There could be a lot of impact of credibility and business would be getting impacted as well, and some of the additional risk that the teams might be taking with respect to loss of institutional knowledge as well. Now, when it comes to this kind of a risk that is being there is reduced as well when the organization is trying to adopt a metadata strategy. So organizational readiness is getting addressed by a formal assessment of the current maturity that you have, right? Now, this assessment that you have should include the critical business data elements as well, whatever the available metadata glossaries are, data lineage, and data profiling, data quality process, all would be should be captured as part of it. And MDM maturity and the other aspect should also be getting captured as part of this. Now, once the overall strategy has to be getting aligned with your overall data governance strategy, because metadata management is again one of the key pillar of the data governance strategy, which the data governance team tries to drive and solve. Align with your business priorities is also very much important because it is something that you're not trying to do it individually. So the governance team should be responsible for defining the standards, what are the different types of status trackings, how you'd be able to create the entire workflow or collaboration between the different teams, what kind of promotional activities or training developments that you might have to organize. So as part of your meta governance, what are business term definitions that you might have to start looking into, what about the different statuses of the each of the data assets that has to go through. All of it has to be defined. And then integrating of this metadata strategy to the entire SDLC lifecycle is also very much important. It will ensure that the metadata that is being collected, how it remains relevant, right? Documentation of the metadata solutions is also important. The master catalog that you will have of your metadata. So it will have your source, your targets that you have currently in place. You know, what are some of the key components that you will have to use. So the metadata implementation status, the source and target metadata store, the schedule informations, the retention versions that you will have, what are different contents, the quality statements or warnings that you might have, the system of record, the data source statuses that you will have. All of it is something that you will be capturing. What are the tools, architecture, and different people that would be involved? All of it will be having. Then on the metadata standards and guidelines, so metadata standards is again, as we have seen, the ISO 11179. There are other types of standards, you might be having. So those might be XML specific standards or some of the other the Dublin kind of a metadata strategy standard can also be one of the use cases that you can have. So these standards are essential to define a kind of a reference or framework that you can align your metadata management program to start using. Right. So there could be some of the industry specific metadata management standards. There would be certain sector specific standards also that might be coming. Like for example, you have seen the taxonomy for species, the classification of human beings. So they have certain specific taxonomical classification, which is on the biological biospecies classifications. And then on the financial industry perspective, you have um, the financial institution of standards, for classification. You have the SIC classifications. So these kind of different standards are also being used as a kind of a guideline when you're doing this. Then there could be certain kind of metrics that you can start evaluating as part of this overall exercise. Now, what are these kind of sample metrics that you can have? Like, say, for example, the metadata repository completeness perspective. How is the metadata repository, whether it's complete with all the metadata, or there is some kind of incompleteness and progress that you want to have. Then the management maturity, the maturity model that we can define. So you can have the CMM, DMM kind of maturity model, the capability maturity model that you can start using for not only for metadata, but for other use cases for other pillars as well. Then you also start identifying the alignment of your different people, like the data stewards, the stewardship models that is being there, the job roles. So that is also a completion and an alignment, whether it is being completed. Then what is the metadata usage? So metadata usage will be useful when it wants to, you want to identify how is the usage happening for metadata that is being captured, different teams, how they are being capturing metadata. Then on the business glossaries perspective, you can identify how the business glossaries are captured, how the business glossaries are being measured, right? Then on similarly, some of the specific areas, right? The quality aspects, the material quality aspects, how it has been there, how we can start capturing and measuring the material quality, the metadata repository where we might be creating. So those kind of things are different ways of metrics that you can start. So as I was mentioning, these are some sample metrics that could be useful when you're trying to track your metadata management program. Okay. So I will stop here for any questions that we have. So this is something that we have under management. Again, now a topic which is just at a high level we are covering from the the entire syllabus that we have from CDMP from Dharma. But each of the material management solutions that you take, there are different types of key capabilities that they have. They all will revolve around these, the topics that we have, the concepts that we have learned today. But they might have different types of enablers. They might have different types of assets, accelerators that they have, the meta model that they might be having specifically for creating that. But you will see all of these capabilities will align to these, the core capabilities or the core area. Now, a lot of people or a lot of things, people, they will start thinking that, metadata management is more, if I learn a solution, I would be able to understand all of these things. So from a tool perspective, technically, definitely, yes, you will understand it. But there are a lot of other aspects of material management, like the ISO standards, and also these are not something that you will directly find in the meta management solution. So it's also very much important to have a balance between your concepts versus your technology. Technology is definitely as a solution when you're using, it will help you to understand these concepts in more depth, but only understanding the solution will not help. And that's the reason having this conceptual clarity is firstly most important, and then once you have that clarity, then you can go ahead and go with the solutions as well. Okay, so I will stop here. So thank you so much for attending this session, and I will upload this and you will be getting an access to it. Please go through it, as well as in case of any questions, queries, you can please reach out to me, and I will come back again with another exciting episode of another interesting topic on data in the next, in the next uh, video that we will be having in the next session, and we will again try to explore some of the, the nitty-gritty and the entire world of data as well. Okay, so thank you so much. You have enjoy your day, enjoy your time, and I will meet you tomorrow in the next session. Thank you. Goodbye.